Revenge doesn't always roar. Sometimes the most devastating revenge is quiet, a slow, precise erosion that happens inside someone's head. It isn't about breaking the other person with drama or spectacle. It's about making them break themselves. That's the kind of move Machiavelli admired. Calculated, invisible, and unbearably effective. He knew the real power lies in restraint, in shaping another person's inner life without ever raising your voice. Here's the central idea. Guilt rarely comes from what someone did. It comes from what they can't explain. When a person hurts you, betrays you, or walks out, they usually expect a certain reaction from you, anger, tears, or a meltdown that gives them a tidy story to tell themselves. I had no choice, they'll think. They made me do it. Those emotional responses are a gift to them. They get to justify their behavior and keep their conscience intact. Your job is to deny them that gift. So, what do? You don't fight fire with more fire. You don't respond with a grand speech or a social media tirade. You don't chase closure. Instead, you step back and keep your composure. Not out of weakness, but out of strategy. You create an emotional vacuum. Silence becomes your public face. Stillness becomes the thing that unsettles them. Suddenly, they're left without an explanation that preserves their ego. That's when the creeping, gnawing doubt begins. When they don't get the reaction they expected, their mind starts to loop. Why didn't they say anything? Are they plotting? Were they better than I thought? Did I overstep? People who hurt others often build mental narratives where they're the reasonable ones. I had to do it, or they were too much. Those narratives rely on the other person giving a certain response. Remove that response and the story starts to fray. But this isn't the same as ghosting or dramatic silence. The silence must look intentional, not vindictive. It should feel like power, not pain. Withdraw with grace, with dignity. Keep your life intact and visible in its quiet competence. Don't post cryptic quotes or subtle jabs, those are bait. Instead, let your absence say what words can't. I saw this, and I'm not wasting myself on it. That kind of serene refusal lands harder than any rant. The first phase, then, is absence without drama. You're not punishing them with tears or public breakdowns. You're punishing them with irrelevance. That word is important. Let them feel that what they did doesn't have the consequence they expected. They wanted proof that they mattered. Deny them that proof. Let the silence nag at them. People fear being forgotten. Being ignored by someone they wronged is a psychic wound that sticks. Next comes the contrast. After you withdraw with calm, you don't pretend you're winning. You don't put on a show. You simply live better, cleaner, quieter. Your growth should be private, but visible enough that it becomes a mirror they can't avoid. This is the trick many miss. The evolution must be genuine and unforced. Get stronger not to spite them, but because you refuse to accept decay. Improve your habits, your space, your body, your mind. The change becomes evidence that their narrative, the one that made them the hero of their own story, was false. That contrast is psychic acid. If they expected chaos and they get composure, they start to question their own story. Maybe I misjudged them. Maybe I was the one who messed up. The guilt doesn't appear as an accusation from you. It appears as a slow, corrosive reevaluation from them. Memory is malleable. Over time, they begin to remember you not as the person they painted you when they left, but as the person who stayed composed, who showed dignity in the moment they tried to strip you of it. And here's the dangerous part for them. Once that doubt takes hold, it multiplies with time. Instead of getting closure by watching you break, they're left with a haunting absence. They scan your social media out of habit. They notice you're calm. They ask mutual friends questions. Their mind keeps finding ways to make you relevant again, but now in ways that feed shame instead of justification. You become the standard they traded away. Crucially, you do not pull this off by performing. Don't stage an elaborate glow-up or broadcast an ironclad narrative of how well you're doing. That's transparent. Real power is subtle. Live your life with intent. Refine your routines. Conserve your energy. And let people see you moving forward naturally. When others observe your steady presence, they'll start to doubt everything the betrayer said. Social perception begins to erode their defenses faster than any argument you could make. At a certain point, the person who hurt you may try to interfere a message, a half apology. That one, "Hope you're well." That's the critical moment where most people fail. Responding, even with a short note, deflates the pressure their guilt carries. It gives them a story again. If you want the guilt to stick, you must resist the urge to relieve it. Ignore that small reach. Maintain the same composed distance you had before. Allow ambiguity to linger. Unanswered silence is harsher than a slammed door because it offers no neat ending. Machiavelli's insight was that true dominance isn't in the loud act of damage. It's in the long-term control of narrative and conscience. He would advise you to architect guilt quietly, through intentional silence, through composure that looks effortless, and through personal evolution that's private yet visible. You're not performing revenge. You're designing an environment where their sense of rightness collapses from within. This first stage silence, withdrawal, and contrast sets the stage. You're planting the seed of doubt and letting time water it. From here, their memory begins to shift. They no longer remember a person who was weak and reactive. They remember someone who didn't bargain with pain. That memory becomes a mirror they can't avoid. And every time they look, they see the consequence of their choice. Now, here's where the real erosion begins. The slow, internal collapse you never have to witness to know it's happening. After you've withdrawn with calm and composure, you step into the second phase of Machiavelli's method, the unraveling of their story. You see, most people who betray or mistreat others already have a mental script waiting to protect them. I had to leave. They were too much. I couldn't handle the drama. Those lines aren't truths. They're emotional shields. They allow the guilty to see themselves as rational, even noble. But those stories only survive if you give them fuel, if you react, defend, or explain yourself. When you don't, when you stay silent, their narrative starts to decay. At first, they'll feel confident. They'll talk. They'll explain to others why they were right, why you were wrong. They'll perform control. But then, as the weeks pass, and you remain a ghost, calm and consistent, their explanations start to sound thin, even to themselves. They remember how you didn't beg, how you didn't spiral. They remember the poise you carried when they expected chaos. And slowly, they begin to feel that subtle dissonance. If they were really that unstable, why did they handle it better than me? That's the question that keeps them up at night. It's not guilt at first. It's confusion. But confusion turns into reflection, and reflection turns into regret. They start comparing. Every person they meet afterward feels lighter, shallower, less steady. They begin to miss not your presence, but the calm your presence created. That's when guilt quietly replaces arrogance. But here's the warning Machiavelli would give. Do not interfere. Don't post something that hints at your pain. Don't reach out to check in. Don't try to make them see what they've lost. That's not power. That's a trap. Every time you seek to prove your peace, you reveal that you don't truly have it. Let them think what they want. Let them talk. Because silence is what turns their guilt from a feeling into a condition. And time is the weapon. People like to believe guilt fades. It doesn't. It hardens. It lingers quietly behind every distraction, waiting for moments of stillness. When they're alone at night, when a familiar song plays, when someone new says something that reminds them of you, the guilt resurfaces, sharper than before. You don't cause it. You simply stop relieving it. Machiavelli's brilliance was in understanding that revenge isn't about retaliation. It's about control of memory. You don't want to make them pay. You want to make them see. You want them to realize slowly and on their own that they broke something rare. Because once that realization arrives unforced, it never leaves. Now, understand something about this stage. People who hurt you will always try to rewrite history. They'll paint you as bitter, emotional, or controlling. They'll tell others you were the problem. That's fine. Let them. The truth doesn't need your defense. It needs your silence. Because silence is suspicious. It invites curiosity. And curiosity turns observers into quiet allies. The longer you remain calm, the more people start to notice that your actions don't match the story they were told. They begin to wonder, if that person was really so dramatic, why are they so composed now? That contradiction speaks louder than any argument. And for the one who wronged you, it's unbearable. Every time someone questions their version, the seed of doubt grows deeper. Maybe I did misjudge them. Maybe I was the one who overreacted. And once that doubt blooms into guilt, you've already won. But here's the psychological core of it. Guilt only thrives when it has contrast. Without contrast, without seeing you evolve, without seeing your peace, their guilt stays manageable. That's why your next move is crucial. You evolve, not loudly, but clearly. Your improvement isn't revenge. It's evidence. It tells them, you didn't break me. You just removed yourself from my way. Every bit of discipline, every ounce of self-control, every calm step forward, it all rewires the story in their mind. They thought you'd collapse. You rose instead, and they'll feel it. Every new achievement, every trace of quiet stability from you feeds their discomfort. Because now they can't tell the story of, I left for peace. You've become peace itself. But Machiavelli would also warn you, don't flaunt it. True evolution is invisible until it's undeniable. No I'm thriving posts, no revenge glow-ups, no dramatic reinventions. Those things scream validation-seeking. Real power whispers. It exists in the way you move, the way you talk, the new boundaries you keep without announcing them. Because here's the paradox. The more you act like you've moved on, the less they believe it. But the more you are moved on, quietly and completely, the more they feel the loss. That's the art of silent revenge. And there will come a point, it always happens, when they'll try to come back. Maybe not directly, maybe just to check how you've been. But the goal is always the same, to relieve the pressure of their guilt. They don't want closure for you. They want closure for them. They want your forgiveness, not to heal you, but to free themselves from consequence. That's when you give them nothing. No hostility, no coldness, just neutrality. The kind of stillness that says, this conversation doesn't exist anymore. If they try to apologize, you don't gloat or reject. You simply say something calm like, I appreciate that. I'm at peace with everything now. That line ends everything. It denies them relief. It tells them that their guilt is permanent, not because you're cruel, but because you've evolved beyond needing their validation. They thought they had power when they walked away. Now, they realize you've taken it all without even touching them. You've transformed their ego's victory into their conscience's burden. This is the moment Machiavelli would call psychological dominance. Not the triumph of anger, but the elegance of emotional control. You never screamed. You never sought revenge. You simply held the mirror until they saw themselves clearly and couldn't look away. That's the essence of Phase 2. Unravel their story until guilt becomes their reflection. Next, we move to the third stage, where silence evolves from a tactic into something deeper, a haunting presence, where you stop being a person in their memory and become a feeling they can't escape. This is where silence stops being a strategy and starts becoming a haunting. You've already withdrawn with elegance. Let the guilt take root, and now the final transformation begins. You become a presence they can't escape, even when you're gone. At first, they'll try to ignore it. They'll fill their life with noise, new people, new distractions, new routines. They'll post, they'll laugh, they'll pretend. But when the performance fades and the quiet hours return, the silence you left behind starts to breathe. It grows, because silence isn't empty. It's full of meaning they can't control. This stage is what Machiavelli would call the psychological residue. It's the lingering presence of your composure that seeps into their daily life. They might tell themselves, "I'm fine," but they'll still check your page. They'll still reread old messages. They'll still ask mutual friends what you're up to, though they'll never admit it. They're not curious about your life. They're desperate to measure their guilt. Every time they see you appear calmer, stronger, more at peace, that guilt amplifies. But the trick is, you don't flaunt your peace. You don't even seem aware of them anymore. You live as though they never existed. You post less. You speak less. But everything you do release, every glimpse of your life, feels grounded, deliberate, alive. That's what drives them insane. Because guilt thrives in contrast. It's not your absence that punishes them. It's the kind of absence you leave. The kind where you look untouchable. The kind that makes them realize you never needed them to begin with. Now, here's the cruel truth about closure. Closure isn't for you, it's for them. They want to come back not to make peace, but to free themselves. They want you to explode, to cry, to confront so they can say, "See, they're still hurt. I wasn't that bad." They want to provoke your reaction so they can turn guilt into justification. Don't give it to them. You don't chase. You don't explain. You let them drown in their own confusion. That's Machiavelli's real genius. He understood that the best punishment is the one people create for themselves. You see, confrontation gives them clarity. Silence gives them uncertainty. And uncertainty breeds guilt. As time passes, they'll start talking about you again, but not to heal. They'll talk because they need a story to survive what they did. They'll say things like, "We just weren't compatible," or "They were too serious," or "I couldn't be myself around them." These lines are shields, not insights. But the longer your stillness lasts, the weaker those shields become. Soon, other people start to notice the cracks. Your calm reputation spreads. You're not bitter, you're not messy, you're not vengeful, you're just fine. Too fine. Suspiciously fine. People begin to wonder if maybe you were the one telling the truth all along. And the person who wronged you starts to feel the pressure of that social doubt closing in. Now it's not just their private guilt. It's the subtle echo of judgment they hear from others. Every whisper, Every skeptical glance reminds them that their story doesn't fit anymore. The silence has turned public. The contrast has gone viral in their small circle. And that's when guilt mutates into shame. Shame is heavier. It doesn't live in thoughts. It lives in the body. It tightens the chest, shortens the breath. It's the realization that they didn't just hurt someone. They destroyed something pure. Something that's now out of their reach. But here's the part most people never understand. You don't want them to return. You don't want them to apologize. Because if they come back and you accept it, the power dies. Their guilt dissolves. They get to rewrite the story as, "We made peace." And peace in this case is just ego's relief. So if they reach out, don't reject them dramatically. That gives them drama. Just don't respond. Leave the door closed, silently. That lack of finality, that ambiguity, will torment them more than anger ever could. They won't know where they stand with you. And that uncertainty is the heaviest punishment of all. Because the human mind can recover from conflict, but it rarely recovers from confusion. Eventually, they'll begin to dream about you. Literally. Their subconscious will replay moments, questions, unresolved emotions. You'll appear in their thoughts when they least expect it, during a quiet drive, in a conversation with someone new, or while scrolling through photos that remind them of something they can't define. That's when you've moved from being a person to being a presence. You no longer exist in their world, but you live in their mind. You're not their memory. You're their measurement. Every new relationship, every new attempt at peace, every new "I'm over it" moment will be quietly compared to you. And none of it will feel the same. Because your silence didn't just end the connection, it rewired it. You've turned from their opponent into their internal judge. Every good moment now carries an echo. This doesn't feel as real. Every bad one whispers, "I deserved this." That's the essence of silent revenge. Erosion, not explosion. You didn't destroy them. You simply stopped participating in their illusion. You let reality do the slow work. Machiavelli understood that when people betray, they don't fear your reaction. They fear their reflection. And your silence is that reflection. It shows them what they lost without you needing to explain a thing. From here, guilt becomes permanent. Not because you're cruel, but because they can't fix what they can't face. They'll replay every detail, searching for a moment where you slipped, a reason to blame you, and they won't find it. And that's when the silence becomes unbearable. Because it's not just that you're gone, it's that your absence now holds meaning. They realize they didn't just lose someone. They lost something rare, something that won't come again. This is where the slow punishment reaches its height. You don't say a word. You don't show up. You simply live refined, peaceful, unreachable. And every day, that peace becomes their mirror, reminding them of what they ruined. The next stage is what Machiavelli would call invisible evolution. It's where your growth no longer looks like recovery. It looks like transformation. Where you stop being someone they once knew and become someone they can no longer imagine approaching. Now, we enter the most powerful phase, the invisible evolution. The stage where you no longer look like someone recovering, but someone reborn. This is where the silence becomes complete. It's no longer about what you're not saying. It's about what you've become in the space where you said nothing. Machiavelli believed that after betrayal, the goal is not retaliation, but transformation. You don't want to remind them of what they did. You want to become someone they can no longer even reach. Not because you disappeared, but because you evolved past the level where their energy exists. At this point, you've done the hardest part. You've held your silence. You've denied them emotional oxygen. You've created contrast. Now you become unrecognizable, not loud, not performative, but unmistakably changed. Your voice becomes steadier, your words fewer, sharper, your routines cleaner. You refine everything, your environment, your boundaries, your discipline. You stop explaining why you do what you do, because you no longer need validation. The calm they once mistook for weakness now reads as authority. They begin to see it. Maybe through someone else's story. Maybe through something they hear about you, that you're doing well, thriving quietly, not seeking attention. They might even smile and say they're happy for you. But underneath that calm exterior is the sting of truth. You didn't just survive them. You outgrew them. That realization crushes them slowly, because when they hurt you, they thought they were powerful. They thought you'd crumble, that they'd watch you fall. But when you didn't, when you rose without rage, you forced them to face something brutal. They didn't break you. They exposed themselves. And every inch of growth you show, every bit of grace you display, reminds them of that exposure. It tells them, I was never who you said I was. You see, people who betray need to believe they were justified. They tell themselves stories like, they were too much, or they didn't value me. It's how they sleep at night. But when you evolve, when your energy, your results, your peace all rise, their excuses collapse. The story can't survive the evidence. That's why you never explain yourself. You never say, I've changed. You let the world see it for you. Let them feel the distance, not through your words, but through your energy. Your silence becomes its own language, one that says, I'm not angry. I'm simply not available for anything that cheapens me anymore. And then, something strange happens. People start questioning them. Not you. They see the contrast between your dignity and their defensiveness. They notice how you never needed to talk about what happened, how you never sought sympathy, never attacked. They start asking questions that make the betrayer uncomfortable. Are you sure it was really their fault? They seem fine. That's when guilt becomes external. It's no longer just in their mind. It's reflected in the eyes of others. This is Machiavelli's favorite terrain. Psychological warfare without action. You're not fighting. You're not correcting the narrative. You're simply existing in such clear contradiction to their lies that the truth exposes itself. And it burns. Because now they can't even defend themselves without looking guilty. The more they explain, the worse they sound. The more they justify, the more desperate they appear. Meanwhile, you remain calm, untouched, unreadable. This is the moment when guilt hardens into permanence. Because now, even if they wanted to fix things, they can't. The opportunity is gone. The version of you that would have listened, that would have forgiven, that would have tried, that version no longer exists. They don't know that consciously, not yet, but they feel it. The distance isn't emotional anymore. It's existential. You've become something they can't approach without shame. They might try to come back. They almost always do. They'll frame it as wanting to talk or apologize or get closure. But closure is a disguise. What they really want is relief. They want to unburden their conscience, to make peace with their own guilt. And here's where most people fail. They confuse that return for redemption. They think it's proof the other person has changed. But Machiavelli would shake his head. He'd tell you, they're not returning for you. They're returning for themselves. So you meet that moment not with anger, not even with kindness, but neutrality, emotional weightlessness. You let them talk, explain, stumble through the words they've rehearsed, and when they finally finish, you look at them and say, I appreciate you saying that. I'm at peace with everything now. That sentence destroys them, because it means they have no more power. Their guilt, their apology, their explanations, all of it dies in the air. You've removed the one thing their ego craved: relevance. And in that moment, guilt turns permanent. Not sharp, not fiery, heavy, lifelong. Because now they know you're not waiting, you're not angry, you're not affected. You've simply transcended them. That's when they start replaying everything, every message, every argument, every glance. They start noticing details they ignored. How calm you were, how composed, how undeserving of what they did you truly were. And they'll realize they didn't just hurt someone who cared. They hurt someone who understood. Someone who saw them completely and still gave them grace. Now that memory will never fade. It won't haunt them every day. It'll just sit quietly in the background, waiting. And in every relationship that follows, they'll feel it again. Every time they sense distance, every time they make a mistake, every time someone treats them the way they treated you, your silence will echo. Because people can heal from conflict, but not from confusion. And your silence is the ultimate confusion. That's the real beauty of this stage. You didn't destroy them. You made them aware. You turned their self-image into a mirror they can't escape. Every time they look at themselves, they'll see the reflection you left behind. Not your pain, but their mistake. And that's when the transformation is complete. You're no longer their opponent, their ex, or their regret. You've become something else entirely. A standard. A quiet, unreachable benchmark they'll measure others against for the rest of their lives. This is the final act, the last stage of Machiavelli's silent revenge, where everything ends without a sound. No confrontation. No vindictive speech. No dramatic closure. Just silence, deep, deliberate, and absolute. You've already done the hardest part. You withdrew with grace. You refused to react. You evolved quietly while they stayed trapped inside their own noise. And now the final transformation begins not in them, but in you. Because this last phase isn't about making them suffer anymore. It's about reaching the point where their suffering no longer matters. That's the moment you stop needing revenge, because you've already won. At first, it doesn't feel like victory. It feels like absence, a strange calm that replaces the chaos. You might even mistake it for emptiness. But over time, you realize that silence isn't emptiness at all. It's clarity. The kind that arrives when you no longer waste your voice explaining what only time could teach. Machiavelli understood this perfectly. He believed the strongest kind of power doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand recognition. It doesn't even need to be understood. It simply is. And that's what your silence has become, not an act, not a tactic, but an identity. You are no longer the one who was wronged. You are the one who outgrew the wound. But here's what they don't know yet. Your silence has been working all along, quietly dismantling the illusion they built to protect themselves. They've told stories to others and to themselves to justify their choices. We grew apart. They were too intense. I had no choice. These words used to sound convincing, but with time, their weight has shifted. Because silence ages differently than noise. Their stories are fading. Your absence is not. They thought they could rewrite history. But silence preserves truth the way still water preserves reflection. Eventually, when they look into it, what they see isn't your face, it's theirs. And what they see is hard to live with. They see the moment they lied, the moment they chose pride over decency, the moment they hurt someone who didn't fight back. That memory begins to pulse like an old injury that never fully healed. They'll try to bury it under distractions, new faces, new relationships, new achievements. But guilt doesn't die from distraction. It grows in stillness, and stillness always finds them eventually. They might not speak your name anymore. They might pretend you never mattered. But the silence left behind by your absence is too heavy to ignore. It lingers in the spaces where you used to be, in the conversations they avoid, in the music they skip, in the quiet moments before sleep. Because silence is not forgetfulness. It's the opposite. It's memory made eternal. That's when the guilt turns into regret. And regret, real regret, is irreversible. It's not sadness for what they lost. It's horror at what they destroyed. Regret is the realization that they didn't lose you by accident. They lost you by choice. And the more time passes, the more they realize what that choice truly cost them. Because you didn't just leave, you disappeared with dignity. You became unreachable, unexplainable. You stopped being a person they could talk about and became a presence they could never escape. Machiavelli would say that's the purest form of punishment, one that requires no blood, no violence, no confrontation. You don't humiliate your enemy. You make them face themselves. And every time they remember you, that's exactly what happens. They remember how calm you were when they expected chaos, how still you were when they expected revenge, how unbothered you became when they expected bitterness. That contrast doesn't fade. It multiplies. Because guilt, when combined with comparison, becomes unbearable. They compare who you were to who they are now, and they see a decline. They compare your silence to their noise, and they feel exposed. They compare their life stability to your quiet rise, and they realize something they'll never say out loud. You won without fighting. That's what disturbs them the most. You never tried to prove them wrong, and yet time did it for you. They expected anger. They got distance. They expected drama. They got peace. They expected to forget. But your absence became unforgettable. Now they start reaching for explanations. They'll ask others about you casually, of course. How are they doing? Have you seen them lately? But behind the small talk is desperation, because they need to know whether your silence was strength or indifference. The truth is, it's both. You didn't go silent to punish them. You went silent to rebuild yourself. You used the space they created to evolve, to strip away the parts of you that once needed validation, that once begged to be seen, that once mistook kindness for weakness. You became something they can't understand anymore, and that's what truly haunts them. Because people can make peace with being hated, but they can't make peace with being forgotten by someone they expected to break. So they start watching. From a distance, they scroll through your social media, pretending it's curiosity. But what they're really searching for is evidence. Evidence that you're still wounded, still reacting, still reachable. But what they find instead is unsettling. You're thriving. Not loudly, not theatrically, just quietly, consistently, fully. Your life doesn't look like a performance. It looks like balance. That's what Machiavelli called the elegance of control. The kind of composure that disarms without effort. And that's when their guilt hardens into self-punishment. They begin to compare every new relationship to you. Not consciously at first, just small echoes. The way someone laughs, the way someone listens. But no one ever feels quite the same, and every comparison deepens the regret. Because they realize something simple but devastating. They didn't just lose someone. They lost access to a piece that doesn't exist without you. That's the slow torture of your silence. It turns memory into measurement. Every joy feels smaller. Every success feels quieter. Every love feels thinner. You've become the standard they'll never meet again. But the secret power of this stage isn't in their pain. It's in your detachment from it. You no longer need them to feel guilty. You no longer need proof that you mattered. You already know you did. The proof is in the echo, the quiet way your presence keeps living in their mind. And that's the highest form of Machiavellian control, the kind that no longer needs control. Because here's the paradox. The moment you stop caring whether they feel remorse is the exact moment the remorse becomes permanent. If they ever dare to reach out, and they will, someday you won't meet them with rage. You won't seek revenge. You'll meet them with neutrality. You'll listen, you'll nod, you'll even smile. But your eyes will say everything your mouth doesn't. You're no longer part of my story. And when they finally finish explaining, apologizing, reminiscing, you'll say the line that ends everything. I appreciate you saying that. I'm at peace with everything now. That sentence is surgical. It cuts deeper than anger ever could, because it offers no redemption, no emotional opening, no continuation. It's finality disguised as grace. After that moment, they'll never find peace again. Not because you cursed them, but because they'll finally understand what your silence truly meant. It wasn't avoidance. It was evolution. You didn't withdraw to punish them. You withdrew because you outgrew the battlefield entirely. And that's when your silence transforms from revenge into legacy. They'll move on with their life, or at least try to. They'll laugh, succeed, fall in love again. But every quiet night, every fleeting pause between distractions, they'll feel it. That ghost of you not as pain, but as judgment. The memory of someone who didn't shout, didn't plead, didn't collapse. Someone who simply vanished and became untouchable. And over time, your absence will turn mythic. You'll stop being a person to them and start becoming a symbol, the standard they compare others to. The calm they can't recreate, the lesson they'll never unlearn. That's what Machiavelli meant when he said the strongest revenge is to make your presence felt long after your departure, to turn yourself into an idea too heavy for their conscience to bear. You are that idea now. You are the echo, the silence that stays, the reflection that doesn't fade. They'll never admit it to anyone. They might even convince themselves they've healed. But the truth will live quietly in the back of their mind, a sentence they'll never say aloud. I lost something pure, and I'll never find it again. And that's it. That's the masterpiece. No blood, no fight, no need to destroy. Because when silence is carried with grace, it becomes the sharpest justice of all. It doesn't punish, it reveals. It doesn't wound, it exposes. You didn't ruin them. You let time and guilt do what you never needed to. And when people talk about you years from now, they won't remember the pain you felt. They'll remember the power of your stillness. They'll say, they never said a word, and somehow that said everything. That is Machiavelli's final lesson. To rise so quietly that your silence becomes unforgettable. To leave so completely that your absence becomes immortal. To end the story without ever closing the book. Because in the end, the most ruthless revenge isn't anger. It's evolution. It's peace. It's the look in your eyes when they finally realize they never broke you. They only broke their access to you.